Your right hand. Thank you. Mr. Broghammer, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is true and accurate?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Dublinsky.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Broghammer, are you the same James Broghammer that caused to be filed in this matter direct pre-filed testimony?
I am.
Do you have any corrections to your testimony before we begin today?
No.
And if I asked you the questions in your testimony on the stand today, would your answers be substantially the same?
Yes.
Your Honor, we move the admission of the direct testimony of James Broghammer.
Are there objections? Seeing none, the testimony of Mr. Broghammer will be admitted.
With that, we tender the witness for cross-examination.
All right. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Mr. Broghammer, I'm Wally Taylor. I represent the Sierra Club. I think you and I met back on June 22nd at your deposition. You remember that?
I remember meeting with you, yes. I don't remember the exact date.
I didn't either. I had to look at the cover page of the transcript. And just some brief background. You're the CEO of Pine Lakes Corn Processors?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's an ethanol plant?
Correct.
Okay. And your facility has signed what are called off-take agreements, an off-take agreement with Summit Carbon Solutions?
Yes.
Yeah. Perhaps I was correct first using the plural because you've signed an original one and then an amended one. Is that correct?
Yes, there's an amended one.
Okay. That initial, and let me paraphrase or state that we don't want to talk about the particulars or the terms of any of those agreements. We're just talking in general terms and kind of at a high level, okay?
Okay.
Because the actual terms are subject to a confidentiality order, so we don't want to have those discussed in open session.
Yes.
So that initial agreement, who did you negotiate with, and who did you sign the agreement with?
Well, the Summit Carbon Solutions team. Don't remember everyone in the room. John, Bruce, others.
We've had testimony that when those initial agreements like yours were signed, that Summit Carbon Solutions had not been formed yet, that it was Summit Ag Group. Does that sound correct?
I don't know that.
Okay. So who are these people you were talking about?
Well, there were several people in the room, but I remember John Probst. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. Yeah, was in the room. Bruce for the initial presentation.
Bruce
Rastetter.
Okay. Anybody else that you can remember?
I can't remember.
Okay. And what encouraged you at that point to sign up with Summit?
Well, the motivating factor for producing plants is the CI. I mean, even back then, 3 years ago, carbon intensity, for those that don't know what CI is, carbon intensity score, our industry has witnessed year after year after year more payout, more focus, and more insistence on a CI score that's lower and lower. So that was the most attractive part of this.
Would an ethanol plant, in your experience, want to sign an agreement with Summit Carbon Solutions if it was a very short-term commitment?
You're asking me I would want to sign a short term.
Would any ethanol plant want to do that?
I can't speak for other ethanol plants. I could speak for myself.
Sure.
And just so you remember, I told you this before, I was actually the CEO of 2 ethanol plants at that time. And from my perspective, signing something for a short period of time was not strategic. I was looking for something in multiple years minimum.
Why?
Because I didn't want to have to go back and try and raise more capital, more permits, more things. I wanted the solution to help us with the CI long term.
Okay. And we've heard testimony that with the current contracts that Summit has, that Summit owns the carbon capture equipment. Is that true in your case as well?
Yes.
And was that an incentive that they were picking up that capital cost rather than you having to do that?
Most certainly.
So, would you expect that an ethanol plant would want to sign a contract where the ethanol plant would agree to pay for that carbon capture equipment?
Try again with it. Try it one more time.
Sure. Would you expect that an ethanol plant would want to sign a contract with Summit where the ethanol plant paid the cost of the carbon capture equipment?
I can't speak for other people. I know it was attractive for us when we looked at it to, they were covering the cost. Of course, they were taking the 45Q, but no, for us, it was good. It's a good decision.
And have you talked to any other ethanol plants that maybe haven't signed with any of the pipeline companies or any other industries that might be thinking about capturing carbon and putting it on a pipeline?
Well, yes, I talk to other people in the industry.
Okay.
All the time. Yes, I do.
And have any of them expressed an interest in a very short-term contract like I was discussing with you earlier?
No, most of them I'm talking to are, how do I get on the pipeline?
The same kind of contract you have.
We don't get into specifics when I talk to them. I don't. Well, you do 2, 5, 10. We don't get into that discussion.
Okay.
That's actually, yeah, it's a little too far.
As I recall from your deposition, the boiler and other power needs of your ethanol plant are powered by natural gas.
Yes.
Okay. Have you given any thought to capturing the CO2 from the natural gas?
As it's burned in the boilers and
Yes.
the turbine? Yes, very much.
Why haven't you done that?
Time. Just give us more time and we'll probably get to that.
And is it much more difficult to capture the carbon dioxide and be able to put it on the pipe in a fairly pure form that the Summit would accept on their pipeline?
That's correct. You're right in that the CO2 concentration is not nearly as high. So you have to come up with a way to purify that. And that's still under development, still under economic evaluation.
But that's not something that's in the very near future, I take it.
Oh, I think it'll be done in less than 5 years. I mean, I don't know for certain, but that's my opinion.
Why do you think that?
Because there's several big companies, top to Caterpillar, They're doing a big project on that, trying to sequester CO2. Mitsubishi has a project out there. There's others, which I probably shouldn't talk about because I signed a confidentiality agreement. But yeah, there's big money trying to figure out how to capture from internal combustion, burning of natural gas, or anything, frankly, to get that CO2.
That's what it's all about, the money.
And the technology.
Am I correct that you're on the board of the Iowa Renewable Fuels Association?
I am.
Can we get the Crowley Exhibit 1, Rebuttal Exhibit 1 up on the screen? There we go. Does that look familiar to you?
No. Just so you understand, to be a board member on the Iowa Renewable Fuels Association, all you have to do is pay the dues.
Okay.
Doesn't mean I attend the meetings.
Well, I represent to you from a prior testimony that this is a study that was done for the Iowa Renewable Fuels Association back in February of this year. You don't know anything about the association requesting that study or anything?
No, I knew I knew they requested for it. Yes.
Okay. You know why it was requested?
Well, I think to help out the people that were looking to build or actually capture and sequester CO2. They're just trying to help the industry out.
Okay. So it was because of the proposed pipelines.
Correct. Yeah.
I think that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Mr. Whippel? Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Broghammer, I just have a few questions for you. Other than partnering with Summit, does your company have other ways to reduce carbon intensity?
Yes. We are pursuing, and I don't know if you're familiar with a combined heat and power, where you actually take natural gas into a turbine, turn a big shaft, basically a jet engine, make electricity, take the waste heat of that, and make steam. So it's called combined heat and power. So you make the power, electricity, and you get heat. Very, very efficient process. It's going to lower our CI. We're also capturing some heat off of our exhaust coming off the dryers. There's a exhaust of water vapor there. We're going to cover some heat from that. And then we reconfiguring both distillations. We have two. We're working on that. So yeah, we're doing a lot of stuff just besides this.
And do you also have other markets for the carbon if you wanted to explore those? Other uses for the carbon that's a byproduct of your ethanol?
We don't have any other use. There's none that I know of.
Well, you're not pursuing any now, but would you be able to convert it to dry ice, for example?
Yes, you could. Yes, you could convert it. And several ethanol plants do have dry ice facilities.
And are you aware of these other organizations out there like Cap CO2 and other projects?
Yes, I have read the advertisement for Cap CO2. It's a bit of an advertisement. It lacks no capital requirements, no operating cost, no yields, and most importantly, it has no sensitivity analysis of what happens when you bring that many more millions of gallons of methanol onto the market. So it's a very concerning project for me. Very concerning.
Does your company intend to utilize the 45Z tax credits?
We will use what is the best, and certainly if you do the math, 45Z will be the best in 25, 26, 27. So that today I'm saying yes.
Okay. So all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Myers. Oh, Farm Bureau Myers, and then you're next, Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Broghammer, my name is David Myers. I'm to your right.
Oh, there you go.
Yes. My name's David Myers. I'm an attorney representing the Iowa Farm Bureau. I have a few questions for you. I know we just picked up on the 45Z, and I'm going to ask some high-level questions. I don't want to get into too many specifics of your offtake agreement, but can we please pull up Mr. Broghammer's testimony, page 3?
Mr. Broghammer, you can move that mic around wherever you'd like to be comfortable.
I got to look here.
Wherever you need. Just wanted you to know.
Okay, I got it.
And then you'll see on line 3, you talk about Pine Lake will receive a benefit of 60 cents per gallon for Summit's project, correct?
Correct. That's the 30 points times 2 cents.
And that's based on what Pine Lake would receive from the 45Z tax credit, correct?
Yes.
And will Pine Lake receive 100% of the 45Z tax credit?
Objection. State your objection.
That details of the split is subject to the confidential offtake agreements, and so we can only talk about that in a closed session.
Okay.
That's fine. Are there any other types of revenue streams that Pine Lake could receive from Summit's carbon capture sequestration project?
Well, as I stated earlier, whenever you lower the CI, there's a possibility of getting paid more for your lower CI fuel, ethanol.
Will Pine Lake have to pay a portion of the operating costs associated with the proposed project with Summit?
I'm sorry, could I have that question repeated?
Will Pine Lake have to pay a portion of the operating costs? I just high level, I'm not trying to get into specifics of dollar amounts or percentages.
At a high level, I think we can talk about that publicly.
Yes.
And are you aware that Mr. Paroli has testified that participating ethanol plants will earn on a net basis an additional 10 to 35 cents per gallon?
Yes.
And do you think that's a more accurate representation of what Pine Lake will receive?
Are we getting too detailed here? Need to wait?
To the extent the question is just, do you think Mr. Paroli's 10 to 35 is more accurate than your 60? I think you can answer that.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it's more accurate.
Can you just explain why there are so many ethanol plants in Iowa?
Well, it's the corn supply, and it's a good corn supply.
Would it also be because of the established infrastructure to sell ethanol?
I don't see that.
Would it also be because of the established infrastructure for selling to gas stations?
Not particularly.
Would it be because of the state policy related to ethanol production and sales?
Yes, it's a very supportive policy in the state of Iowa.
And would it also be because of the number of livestock creating demand for ethanol byproducts, such as DDGS?
Yes, that helps.
And I will ask that we pull back up your testimony, page 3, line 19. And I'll give you a second to read.
Okay.
So when asked what would be the implications of the ethanol industry in Iowa if the SCS MCE project is not available to be completed, and one of the implications you noted is Iowa ethanol plants will be unable to compete and will be gone as fast as it takes to expand ethanol production in other states, correct?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
And was your statement based on the Iowa Renewable Fuels Association paper?
No.
What was that based on?
Well, it's the simple math that I point out here. An ethanol plant that has carbon sequestration is going to garner the 60 cents per gallon. You get roughly 3 gallons per bushel, so you're up to $1.80. And basis across the state of Iowa, 50 cents will take corn a long ways. It'll leave Iowa.
And does your statement assume that other states and counties will approve the CCS project pipeline?
Somewhere, whether it's North Dakota, South Dakota, some of the plants in Illinois are going to do direct. Yes, somewhere.
And does your statement assume ethanol plants won't qualify for the 45Z tax credit without the proposed pipeline project?
Now remember, 45Z kicks in at a CI score of 50. So will some plants get under the 50 with, we hope to get under the 50 with our current improvement projects. So some will get down there, and if you happen to be in Nebraska where you have a lot of cattle and don't have to drive the feed, they will definitely be under 50. So no, there will still, some will reach the Z, some will.
And does your statement assume that federal tax credits will continue past their sunset date?
Okay, there's 45Z, which is 3 years, and then 45Q, which is, help me out, maybe a dozen years or 10 years, something.
12 years, yes.
Yeah. But no, my assumptions don't go past that.
And will Pine Lake move its operations to another state if the pipeline is not granted?
I have no idea.
Sticking with your same statement about ethanol plants moving out of the state of Iowa, were there any other factors you considered other than Summit's proposed pipeline project in making that statement?
No, I made this statement based on the pipeline. That's how I came to all of this.
And did you focus on any factors that might weigh against moving ethanol plants out of the state?
No, I was just simply using simple math.
And again, I just want to confirm your statement about ethanol plants moving out of the state was solely based on Summit's proposed pipeline project, correct?
That's how I based this logic.
And can you just please indicate what a basis is as it relates to the price of corn?
That's a great question. So those of us that buy corn daily, we trade against the Chicago Board of Trade. And then any plant that buys corn or elevator or anything that buys corn, you post a price for corn and it will state a reference month on the Chicago Board of Trade. And then it'll be plus 60 cents a bushel, minus 30 cents a bushel. It does have a wide variety. For those that have lived in Iowa, you know it can be as high as $2-3 and as low as $1. So the basis is really the price you're posting against the reference month on the Chicago Board of Trade.
And then just want to go to page 4 of your testimony, please. Yep. So you'll see there on line 4, you state, I would expect Iowa farm producers will see a 50 cents to $1 per bushel lower corn basis, which correlates directly to the cost of transporting the corn to an ethanol plant that sequesters CO2, correct?
That is correct.
And did you consult any study or expert when coming up with this number?
I looked at the basis posted that day, Fort Dodge, Iowa, and I can't remember the town, somewhere in eastern Iowa. I just looked at the basis that day.
And so you just came up with those numbers on
It
your
was
own?
like 80 cents that day. So I used the range of 50 to $1.
And just to confirm, you came up with those numbers
Yes,
on
I
your
did.
own? Would it surprise you to know that the Iowa Renewable Fuels Association paper, under its kind of scenario 4, only notes an expected, the price levels would only be expected to be weakened by 35 cents per bushel to cover the costs associated?
Well, I think they're low.
Is Pine Lake paid per bushel of ethanol or per gallon for their ethanol?
And overpaid per gallon.
If you're paid per gallon, how is the $1.80 per bushel relevant to the total benefit of the proposed pipeline project for Pine Lake?
Yeah, so I took the great question. So I've taken the 30 points of reduction times 2 cents, and then roughly 3 gallons of ethanol per bushel. So real simple math.
Farmers will not receive a $1.80 per bushel increase in price, correct?
No,
If the pipeline project was granted and put into service, how much will Pine Lake pay farmers for corn?
but it's always based on what the market will bring. So I can't answer that. It's hard to tell that down in the future.
And as you sit here today, strike that. So you don't know whether farmers will be paid more for their corn as a result of Summit's proposed pipeline project, correct?
No, I can say is someone that does have a pipeline is going to have an economic value and will invest more dollars and will create more demand for corn and therefore raise the price of corn relative to others. But I can't say the price. I can't say it's going to be this.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Mr. Meyer.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm over here. Represent the Hardin County Supervisors. Is the takeaway from your direct testimony and your testimony today that without at least the Summit proposed pipeline in connection with all of these other potential pipelines, that the ethanol industry would be unsustainable without it?
We would be unsustainable against those that do have it.
If other lines are permitted and this line is not, you're nodding your head. Is that
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
You've got an MBA in business and you've been in farming, owned ground, rented ground for years. Safe to say that when there's incentive to grow corn, people grow more corn?
I believe so, yes, always.
And then what's the correlating response to that in the market?
Prices go down, supply and
Suppression
demand.
of prices, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we create this a bit of a flare, farmer may enjoy it for a short while until the next crop rotation and more rows of corn are planted, and then the price is coming down, so it's a flare for the grower, correct?
Well, there's certainly ebbs and flows, but what we can say, and I believe this, and I've experienced this myself, pre the ethanol industry, we had the posted county price, the loan deficiency payments, the just general support from the federal government for anybody raising corn, and today we sustain a much higher level in the profitability, and I know that because I own farmland. I have 2 brothers that farm, so I know what ethanol has done for the farmers personally.
From your direct testimony, looks like you've been a grower or had land, either you were renting it out or renting it to grow since the late 70s. So you were around during the farm crisis of the 80s, correct?
I was.
Would you agree that farm crisis was fueled in large part by public policy that created a bubble that burst and crushed small operators or overextended operators?
I was a little young then, still in high school. I'm going to say I don't know. I'm going to say that I don't know. I wish my dad was still alive. I would ask him what he felt caused the 1980 farm crisis. But it did bankrupt many, many people I knew went out of farming in the 1980s, from the bubble or whatever you want to call it. I'm not qualified to say. I just don't know.
You think they incentivized growing corn to feed the world, and then changing policy crushed farmers?
I'm going to say I definitely don't know this. I don't know for sure. I know there was a farm crisis. I know it was terrible for my dad. I know, but if you're going to ask me what the real reason was, I'm not the guy to ask. I don't know. I just know there was a farm crisis.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jorde?
Yes, thank you. I would offer Exhibit 552, the witness's deposition, if that hasn't been done already.
That was my follow-up question. Thank you. Are there any objections? Seeing none, it will be admitted as Broghammer deposition.
Thank you. Your entity is a cooperative, is that right?
The Pine Lake Corn Processors is an LLC wholly owned by Innovative Ag Service, a cooperative.
All right, so it's not farmer owned in the traditional sense of what we might think of co-op, correct?
It's owned by a co-op. We're owned by a co-op.
Okay, so the entity you mentioned, you're saying is a co-op of, is it of local farmers, or who are the owners of that co-op? Or
Okay, let's just say it one more time. Pine Lake Corn Processors is a limited liability partnership, it's PLCP LLLP, and that entity is owned entirely by Innovative Ag Service, which is a co-op here in Iowa, one of the larger co-ops in Iowa.
All right, and is that a co-op with farmer owned? Is that what you would say?
I think it's farmer is the right word to use. Producer, anybody that utilizes the services of a co-op has a share, right?
And have you promised to pass on to any farmers or producers that sell you corn, or will do in the future, to pass on 100% of any bump or increased profits you would receive?
No.
Okay. And have you sent out a newsletter or any formal indication to any of your owners that you will no longer be a going concern or face bankruptcy or material risk of to be going forward concern should Summit Carbon Solutions pipeline application be denied?
I have not.
All right. Do you forward contract corn supply?
I think we have about 20 days bought, so a little bit. Sometimes it gets a little more.
And for any contracts that you have, assuming or if this were to go through, would you be willing to renegotiate those to pay more for corn of the contracts you've already secured?
No.
All right, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions from the parties. The board has one very, very brief question. On page 3, line 21 and 22, there we are. Can you clarify for the board, when you say $1.5 billion bushels of corn, is that $1.5 billion worth of corn or $1.5 billion? Can you just clarify what that
I'm sorry, the dollar sign should not be, it should be 1.5 billion.
Okay.
2.5 billion raised, 60% goes to ethanol. The ethanol industry leaves Iowa. 1.5. Good.
Okay.
That was a typo there.
You have a question? No, go ahead.
Just quickly here, over the last 2 weeks, I've heard cap CO2 mentioned multiple times. Many landowners have, while they were in your same seat, brought up cap CO2. Had not heard of cap CO2 prior to this, so I'm trying to learn more about this since it's become part of the record. So You had a question just a little bit ago about cap CO2. What do you know about cap CO2?
So it's they have their very first plant, which tells you it's a bit of an R&D effort, being built in Atkins Energy, I believe. Methanol will be the product they make. So here's what I don't know. I said this a little earlier. I don't know the capital cost. I don't know the operating cost. I don't know the yields. I don't know, most importantly, I don't know what happens when you bring that much more methanol into a market that's, this big and defined this big. What happens when you bring another 2, 5, 10, 20 million gallons of methanol into that market? That's called a sensitivity analysis. And you just don't know this. And so this is a bit of an R&D effort here. Actually, it's a big R&D effort.
Sorry, Mr. Broghammer, when you said this big, you made a hand gesture. So you mean big, large, small, confined? Can you just define?
It's a defined market right now. Methanol is a defined market, and I think it's used in pharmaceuticals and a lot of specialty type markets. And it's this big. It's as big as it is. So I'm not exactly. Actually, that's one of the things I don't know. They don't tell you how big it is. And I'd like to know that. Is it 10 million gallons or is it 10 billion? It's not 10 billion. I know that, but I don't know the size. So when I talk about sensitivity analysis, so let's say the whole market today is 10 million gallons, and just one plant like Pine Lake makes 20 million gallons. What do you think that market's going to do? The margins will crater, and there'll be no margins. I mean, so. There's no sensitivity analysis I've seen in that business proposal. It reminds me a lot of the early thought process of switchgrass to cellulosic ethanol. Lots of promises and nothing delivered here. So I'm very concerned about this. I don't see the technology and I don't see the economics. And yes, I have an engineering degree, and yes, I have a business degree. So I'm very concerned about it. Not to say, I'm not here to say it's not going to work. I'm just saying there is 1,000 questions to be answered yet.
So you said methanol is the end product.
That's what I'm reading in the advertisement.
Okay. And you said you're an engineer. I don't know if chemical engineering, mechanical, whichever. So what, in terms of methanol as a final product, what's methanol? Is it toxic?
No, I don't believe so, no.
Is it flammable?
Oh, yes.
Is it used in applications where it's a fuel source?
I don't know of one, but I don't know that market. I'm going to say that.
So if you, and again, I'm trying to learn more about cap CO2. I'm taking it that this may be something that's put at the ethanol site potentially and converting the CO2 to this methanol product. Would a pipeline have to be built to transport the methanol?
I know of methanol being transported by rail cars. I do know that. Only because an empty methanol car, showed up at the ethanol plant one day, said, "What's this?" and called all the appropriate people, and the car got shipped back to the wrong plant. So I do know it ships in cars, rail cars. But that's the only reason I know that, because an empty one showed up at my doorstep.
So a methanol rail car cannot be used to haul ethanol?
No, you cannot. You should not mix those.
Gotcha. All right. Well, anything else that you can add about this technology that's I know nothing about?
No, I can't answer anymore.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. DeWinsky.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just one quick clarifying question on redirect. Mr. Broghammer, you recall a conversation you had with the attorney from Farm Bureau about your testimony talking about a 60 cent per gallon
Right.
benefit. Is that a gross figure?
Yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Yes, that's a question.
Thank you. Mr. Myers, do you anticipate needing Mr. Broghammer for confidential?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Broghammer,
Will I need to stay for confidential, or am I?
Doesn't look like it. You're excused.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Duplinsky, go ahead.
Your Honor, if it is the board's preference to keep going outside of confidential